So Bitcoin on the brink of making history. But first things first, before I get into that, I want to go ahead and talk about this potential bottom for Bitcoin. So where are we at right now with price? Where can we go? How high can Bitcoin go from here? And is the bottom in? So let's go ahead, break down what I see historical patterns playing out. We do know that Bitcoin is down around 54%, 53% from the all-time high. That was a fantastic drop. We've been down 5 weeks in a row, and we actually started this week off in red. That would have been 6 weeks in a row of red. And last time we saw something like that was like 2022. We have not seen this type of downward price action. We did have that somewhat last year, but it dropped substantially more the past few months. Now, we also know that a 53% bounce isn't necessarily a bottom for Bitcoin. I did talk about that. I'll get into that here in a little bit because historically, last cycle, we had around a 78% drop for Bitcoin, 77%. And the cycle before that, we had closer to like an 80% drop or so, okay? So around 85%. So yeah, these drops in Bitcoin tend to go much lower for the actual bottoms, but this is what we need to talk about. It's time for a relief rally potentially. You don't need to worry about a bottom right now. You need to trade what's in front of you. And if you're an investor, understanding that a 50% drop in Bitcoin from all-time highs always leads to higher highs later on. So don't be shocked if Bitcoin hits a brand new all-time high in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe even sooner than that. So we do know investing-wise, these are great returned places to buy as far as dollar cost averaging for Bitcoin long term. Now, let's go ahead and zoom on in with what's going on. Now, we do know that Bitcoin is breaking down on the daily chart. We've got a massive daily green candle. Some good news, of course. We do know that NVIDIA earnings are coming in, and that is a big deal right now because AI is such at a global scale. It is sucking liquidity out of tech stocks, and so we do want to see some potential more risk on coming into the market, and I believe that good earnings is going to help with that overall. But a green day, a green candle for Bitcoin, take a look at some stuff such as like, the anchored VWAP. We're actually well and above that now. And really what that represents is the average price that people have paid since the low. And we haven't been able to really hold above that range very long. And today it just looks really strong. So again, that's always a good thing overall with Bitcoin, but breaking it down, we were in need for a rally because I talked about historically the number of weeks that we had been down. But this is the thing. Only one time historically, back in 2018, 6 months in a row from August of 2018 to January of 2019 did we have 6 months in a row of red. We currently have had 5 months in a row of red, and I would not be shocked at all if even February could potentially turn into a green candle. But I do think for sure what we're going to see is March be green for Bitcoin. Now, seasonality-wise, it makes sense as well, because if you want to go back and look at the previous February Marches historically over Bitcoin, we'll just go to the daily chart here. You're going to notice that every February, after the all-time high, we tend to have a nice bounce after a hard downtrend. Okay, so seasonality-wise, tends to be a great time. As well, I always talk about sell in May and go away. Really, over the past few cycles, we've also seen that May be red after the halving or after the all-time high. And so that was 18 to 19% in 2018. In 2022, we had 15%, then 37% the next month. So will this be red again? I think that it makes sense that we're going to have some green in March, potentially in April, and then some more profit taking in May and June. I'll show you how high I think we can go and what we have to do to get there. Now, as far as seasonality, as I said, that was 2022. And back in 2018, 2017, you guys, some of you probably weren't around here, but I was here, and we dropped from like 20K to 6K, and everybody was like, okay, that was the bottom. We're going to go to 100K next, right? Everybody was mega bullish, just like they always are after an all-time high in a pullback. That was just a small pullback, right? But we did bounce, and we did go almost 2x from 6K to up to almost 12K that cycle. So just understand that the bounce can be quite hard if we do bounce here and go higher. And what I think specifically how high we can go, I'll go ahead and break that down. But first, let's go ahead and look at where we're at. Now, we do know that currently we're above the VWAP there. If I were to go ahead and take that off and take a look as well at, structure-wise, I hate trading trend lines, but check this out. We're finally starting to break this downtrend here that's been here since early February, the last few weeks. So this is showing some strength in Bitcoin as well, too. I like to use these kind of as confluence, right? I don't like to trade trend lines necessarily, but they can work on occasion depending on the asset. What I do like to look at, right, is looking at the top of the range here. And so what that means is I want to get above this 72K level. So that's what I want to look for Bitcoin to break above. If we can get above that, I think we can look good to go quite a bit higher. Let me go ahead and mark that. And so this is the area, okay? And so we want to be able to break 72K, get above that range. And then from there, historically, if we were to go ahead and look, we can look on the daily, but just understanding there wasn't a lot of trading done in between 72 and up to around 85, 86K. Now that also matches up quite a bit with the previous low and this previous area that acted as support. So I think that what we can potentially see here is really Bitcoin to not only bounce, but bounce with haste and make its way on up to this level around 85 to 87K. So I do think that if Bitcoin can show strength here and break above this area, that we're going to see this hold, as long as this can hold, price move up, hopefully very efficiently and rather quickly up to around 85K, which would give us a $20,000 increase in price. Then where it's almost at right here, making it up here, is around a 40% bounce or so, over 40% bounce. And so, like I said, back in 2018, we saw Bitcoin price double after the all-time high and its short-term bottom out, and as well in 2022, we didn't see it go that high. Yeah, actually we did. We saw it 46%. I thought it was a little bit less than that, but 46% bounce before it continued on its downtrend. So it's not shocking. It should not be shocking to you to see Bitcoin bounce 40% from the lows. And then potentially, if we cannot make higher highs there, then to roll back over time, and then, going into May and June, and then going sideways, and then coming back up. Now, why did we need to bounce? Because sentiment was in the gutter. We do know that we had tariffs struck down by the Supreme Court, which is typically good overall for the markets. We've had neutral rate cuts from the Federal Reserve, and then we know that, of course, military operations between U.S. and Iran hasn't been too good. It's been a little bit bearish, but we also know that sentiment was in the gutter. I've said that many times, that you have to understand people get frustrated in the bear market, prices fall, fear takes over, and that's when bottoms tend to be formed, at least short term. I talked about bottom price targets potentially in the next 8 months, as I still believe that Bitcoin can go lower than it is. But I also said right after that, I'm predicting a bounce by March and April, right? I'm predicting a relief rally for the fact that seasonality-wise, we always have that. Sentiment-wise, we need it. And as far as we just need a bounce, because markets don't go straight up and they don't go straight down. And so even if Bitcoin were to go further down in price, it's not going to do that. Historically, you can see that the way that it moves, even back in November through January, we saw it chop and go up a little bit before a further downside. And so this was quite a bit of a drop, really fast. So that tells me that we can actually pump to a relief rally fast as well, too. So what I do believe, what's going on right now is that Bitcoin needs to break this area of around 72K. I believe if we can hold that, then we can make our way back up to where we had a lot more trading and support area of the previous range, and that's around 85 to 87K. If I were to also to break down the VWAP, I believe that the VWAP from the all-time high, the anchored VWAP, also matches in that area. So if I were to go ahead and hit that and come to here, yeah, and it comes down to here too. So again, average price that people have bought since the all-time high is around that area of 88K. So to me, with all this confluence, I do believe that this would be a great take profit area, or at least a great spot for Bitcoin to make its way back up. And if it can do that, then I think that we're going to have a pretty good March coming up. Historically, like I said, you never have this many red months in a row. It's something called mean reversion. Again, you can't just keep going straight down, straight down, straight down. For an asset that has a historical chart like Bitcoin, asymmetric as it has been, and the huge upside, right? We continue to go up. And so we know that Bitcoin is having major adoption by not only BlackRock and banks, but more and more companies are accepting it as well. But major adoption, we know it's not going to zero, okay? We do see that the government is trying to pass laws where we're having, of course, with more crypto and blockchain adoption. And so with that said, Bitcoin is not going anywhere. And if it's not a altcoin, meme coin that's dying and going to zero, which we know Bitcoin's not, then I believe that it's fine. And so really, you never see historically it go in the red like this. You're going to have some mean reversion. You're going to have a bounce, and it's time for a bounce, I think, as we go into March. Now, a lot is going to depend on what the stock market does as well, too, if we can continue to see this break above the all-time highs, because right now it has been stuck here in this range. But again, if we have some positive earnings this month, if we have some other good news from the government, possibly from the Fed, we could potentially see this rally a little bit higher. And I think prior to the summertime, at least in the United States, that we can have a nice rally here. And then maybe we'll go back and look and see, where's Bitcoin? What is the stock market doing? What's the sentiment? What are the fundamentals? Do we need to sell here at 88K if it hits here, and then expect a lower low? Time will tell. But for now, what I'm telling you is I think that it's a great opportunity that if we can break this 72K level, that we're going to go quite a bit higher, potentially up to as high as maybe $88,000 per Bitcoin. All right, guys. So with that said, hopefully that is encouraging to you. Some big news, as Bitcoin, of course, has historically not been this red for this many months in a row, but maybe once in its history. So it's due time. It's due time. So let's see what we're doing here as far as price action goes. Hopefully earnings go well, and we'll continue to look at the market each and every week. All right, guys, with that said, I hope you have a great rest of your day and trade safe. I will see you on the next one.